Hello and welcome in to another edition of the Tech in 10 postgame show from the Ruston Daily Leader. I am sports reporter Matt Belinson coming to you after another overtime loss for the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs, this time a 42-34 double overtime loss to the Florida International University Panthers. We're going to continue to call them FIU from here on out to save some time. Uh, but nonetheless, Louisiana Tech falls to 2-6 on the season, 1-3 in Conference USA play. Um, Landry Lyddy gets his first career start as a Bulldog after Parker McNeil, didn't get the go ahead in pregame warmups, was not healthy enough according to Sonny Cumbie, and the Bulldogs rolled with the freshman, and he came out hot and came ready to play. Obviously he came in last week against Rice with some heroics late in the fourth quarter and in overtime to give the Bulldogs a chance to win against the Owls. Unfortunately for them, they were unable to come out with a victory. And you give the freshman the full start tonight. Played the entire game and looked pretty good. And we'll get into his play in a second here. But overall, the Bulldogs, once again, just execution is costing this team opportunities to win. Obviously 2-6 now in the season. If a bowl game was even still a possibility coming into tonight, that's all thrown out the window at this point. The Bulldogs obviously will still try and win some games here to wrap up Sonny Cumbie's first season as head coach. But right now the Bulldogs are just not executing at a level where they're going to be able to win most of these Conference USA games going forward. That starts with special teams, stopping the run. Tonight it was stopping the aerial attack of FIU, which we'll get into in a second. But just in general, the Bulldogs lack the execution necessary to win these close games. Call it a heartbreaker, call it, bad luck, whatever you want to call it. The good teams execute in games like this. I think it's a tried and true formula for most coaches when they want to motivate their teams is they have to win the close ones. It's one thing to beat every single team, by 50 points or by 40 points. But I think the true teams that are contenders find ways to win these close ones. Double overtime, fourth quarter battle, it doesn't matter. If you want to consistently be known as a winner and you want to build this program, Sonny Cumbie knows that the Bulldogs will not get there until they are able to overcome themselves and win games like this. But enough of that. We can dive into the specifics. We'll start with Landry Lyddy. Obviously, like I mentioned, his first career start tonight as a Bulldog. He finished 28 of 40 for 256 yards and a rushing touchdown early in the first quarter. He came out hot, completed 9 of his first 9 passes for 111 yards to the air. And you said, "Oh, okay, here we go. This kid's coming out here, no fear whatsoever. He's ready to command this offense and lead the Bulldogs to some scoring opportunities." And the Bulldogs did. They scored on their first 2 possessions, and you thought, okay, here we go. Landry Lyddy is showing why, he was a highly rated prospect coming out of Calvary Baptist into the Sonny Cumbie's program and into the Louisiana Tech program. And you said, okay, here we go. Let this kid cook, and we're going to see what he has the rest of this game and the rest of this season. And then the offense kind of stalled. Unfortunately for them, their leading receiver, Trey Harris, went out with an injury, a toe injury, as Sonny Cumbie said after the game, and he tried to re-enter the game, but to no luck for the Bulldogs, and losing a weapon like that is huge already. Once you're losing your starting tight end Griffin Hebert already for the second straight game, now you lose your leading wide receiver. Landry Lyddy was dealt a bad hand, but nevertheless, I thought he played pretty well. He was working well in the RPO game. He didn't, run the ball at all tonight. It was obviously Marquise Crosby took care of that, but I thought the RPO game was working well for him. He was getting the ball out quick. They got a little bit away from the tempo that I think makes this offense so effective for a while, and I think you could see that Lyddy was kind of starting to overthink things. He was missing receivers, whether that was a miscommunication on his end or their end, I wouldn't know, but he was clearly missing receivers, throwing behind guys. Honestly, FIU could have had 2 or 3 picks. Like I said, Lyddy was just underthrowing balls. He was not reading the defense properly. corners were coming in, seemingly out of nowhere in his eyes. But on replay, it was clear as day that they were still in coverage when he made the throw, and we're stepping in front of the ball. That was the same kind of theme for Louisiana Tech's defensive backs tonight. Multiple interceptions in hands were not caught tonight. So, overall, Lyddy played pretty well in his first career start. I would imagine they're just going to roll with him the rest of the season. Sonny Covey did say they're going to let Parker McNeil heal up another week before they return to Ruston for a home matchup against Middle Tennessee. I have to think if you gave Lyddy the start tonight and it was close with McNeil, I have to think at this point you're 2-6. What's the harm in letting Lyddy just ride out the rest of the season? As someone pointed out to me on Twitter, why would you start Lyddy? He was going to come in as your starter next year anyway. Parker McNeil and Matthew Downing were going to be gone. What's the harm in seeing what you have? I think if you're Sonny Cumbie, going forward, you're trying to build this program. You're trying to see what you have going forward that you can build off of. And I think if you can get a clearer picture of what Landry Lyddy can and cannot do going into next season, I think that gives you an advantage. I think it would be, advantageous for them if they have the opportunity to figure out what this kid can do rather than, okay, here we go, first game of the season in 2023. Let's see what this new kid can do in a brand new system and then give him time to develop. I think in a season like this where you're not making a bowl game, you're not going to vie for the conference title, I think it's just important to let this kid figure out what he needs to work on, work with the playmakers in this system, and just figure out who he is as a college football player. He came in as a night with under 10 career passes collegiately and had 28 completions tonight. So I think overall you're pretty pleased with what you're seeing right now from him. And obviously, switching gears to the next topic, I think the quarterback's best friend when you're starting like this is a good run game. And for the Bulldogs, both stopping and producing in the run game was not exactly this team's formula through the first couple of games. But Marquise Crosby changed that tonight. He finished with 115 yards on 21 carries. Pretty impressive from the redshirt freshman who, like I mentioned before, he hadn't crossed the 100-yard mark in any Conference USA games this season. He had close to 200 yards against Stephen F. Austin early in September. But Conference USA was not the friend of this run game. But tonight, Marquise was able to find the end zone twice, including overtime, to give the Bulldogs a brief lead, but not enough for the win in the end. I thought he was pretty well tonight. He cut the holes when he needed to. He was able to spin off defenders multiple times. I thought the offensive line was working really well and moving upfield, creating extra lanes. Because I think Crosby typically likes to bounce it outside. I don't think even though they did call his number multiple times through the middle of the defense, I think he's one of those running backs where he likes to get to the edge and kind of find his yardage that way. So I thought the offensive line did a pretty good job tonight of creating those lanes for him and allowing that run game to finally flourish. And especially if you're going to roll with Lyddy the rest of the way, having a run game as effective as this with Crosby is only going to help. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep this up. Like I mentioned, this is the first time in Conference USA play that Crosby has rushed for 100 yards. So history would tell us that it's likely not to happen again. But hey, maybe they found something after that Rice game to translate into getting this offensive line to create better opportunities for these running backs. Like I said, it was his best game, maybe not of the season. Obviously, like I said, 200 yards against Stephen F. Austin earlier in the year. But I think the signs of an improving running game can only help this team. And like I mentioned, if you're Sonny Cumbie, Marquise Crosby is probably going to be here next year. And if you want to see what this offense can look like, I think you got a pretty good idea of the potential of a Marquise Crosby and Landry Lyddy, led offense. Which, tonight, obviously, they put up 34 points. It's a pretty good showing. The defense, however, it had its missed opportunities. The secondary had its issues in the first half defending the long ball. FIU was able to score multiple times on some long yardage plays, converted on a lot of third downs. A team that came in inside the top half of third down conversions in Conference USA. And just kept it going on multiple drives. The quarterback for FIU was able to find his receivers in space. The corners outside of Willie Roberts were not really able to find opportunities to keep FIU receivers in check. And in the end, FIU put their foot on the gas and never really relented and kept Louisiana Tech, guessing and kept Louisiana Tech off balance, and they were able to convert third downs and keep this game, where they wanted to be. And in the end, the Panthers found a way to win. Now Louisiana Tech returns home for a matchup with Middle Tennessee in a must-win game. Obviously, like I mentioned, you're not going to a bowl game, you're not winning the Conference USA title. But I think if you're Sonny Cumbie and this young program trying to build itself, any losing skid, it's going to hurt morale. It's going to cost you opportunities to build any sort of momentum going into the next year. So I think they got to nip this in the butt right now, return home, build a new home winning streak before the year ends, and hope that you can find answers about what Landry Lyddy, Marquise Crosby, and the rest of this, what the rest of this team can be going forward. Because really, that's all you're doing at this point. You're not trying to, compete for the conference title. You're trying to see what tangible assets can we bring to the 2023 season. When hopefully, if you're Sonny Cumbie, this thing starts to take off. But for now, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Tech in 10. FIU defeats Louisiana Tech 42-34 in double overtime. For the Ruston Daily Leader, I'm sports reporter Matt Belinson. Thank you all for listening, and have a good one.